Madison Brooks knew something was terribly wrong the moment she pulled into the driveway of their Victorian-style home in Sonoma Valley. The absence of Nathan's silver Mercedes in its usual spot and the darkness of the porch light she always left on sent a chill down her spine. At 7:15 p.m. on a crisp Tuesday in October, her husband should have been home from the investment firm hours ago. The click of her heels against the weathered wooden porch echoed in the unsettling quiet as she juggled her laptop bag and a stack of vineyard management reports. The family vineyard, Brookside Estate, had been struggling lately, and she'd spent the afternoon with their accountant, poring over disheartening numbers. The key stuck in the lock, it always did. But tonight the house felt different. Colder, emptier. The scent of Nathan's cologne, usually lingering in the foyer, was conspicuously absent. "Nathan?" Her voice echoed through the foyer, met only by silence. Madison's stomach tightened as she climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the plush carpet muffling her steps. The walk-in closet door stood ajar, and even before she flicked on the light she knew. His side was empty. Every tailored suit, every pair of Italian leather shoes, even his favorite worn Stanford sweatshirt gone. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone, dialing Nathan's number, straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again. On the fourth try, she noticed the envelope on his pillow, her name written in his precise handwriting. "Dear Madison," it began. "By the time you read this..." She couldn't finish. The words blurred as tears welled up. Instead, she opened her banking app, something inside her already knowing what she'd find. Their joint account, $243.17. The savings account, $0. The investment account closed. 12 years of marriage gone, along with their life savings. The room spun. Madison sank onto the edge of the bed, their bed, clutching the letter. Through the window she could see the rows of grapevines stretching into the darkness. Her father's legacy, now her responsibility, and the one thing Nathan couldn't take away. As the reality of her situation sank in, Madison's mind raced. How could Nathan do this? What had she missed? The signs had been there. His late nights at the office, the mysterious phone calls, his growing disinterest in the vineyard's future. But she'd been too busy, too trusting to see them for what they were. With a deep breath, Madison forced herself to read the letter. Nathan's words were cold, businesslike. He spoke of irreconcilable differences and pursuing other opportunities. Not a word of apology, not a hint of remorse for leaving her financially ruined. As she read, anger began to replace shock. This wasn't just a betrayal of their marriage, it was a calculated move to strip her of everything. The next morning brought reality in harsh waves. Madison sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of past due notices for the vineyard's equipment loans, unpaid property taxes, and credit card statements with astronomical balances she'd known nothing about. Each envelope felt like another blow. The sound of tires on gravel made her head snap up. For a brief, hopeful moment, she thought it might be Nathan returning, coming to explain that this was all a terrible mistake. But it was Maya, her best friend since college, arriving with coffee and determination. "We need to call the police," Maya insisted, watching Madison pace the kitchen. "And tell them what? That my husband cleaned out our accounts and disappeared? That's not illegal, Maya. We had joint accounts." Madison's voice cracked. "He had every right to take it. Then we call a lawyer." Maya's tone left no room for argument. "This isn't just about the money, Madison. The vineyard. The vineyard is all I have left." Madison stopped at the window, looking out at the morning fog rolling over the vines. "Daddy trusted me with it. I can't lose it too." Maya moved to stand beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Tell me about the vineyard situation. Maybe there's something we're missing." Madison sighed, turning to face her friend. "It's bad, Maya. Really bad. The last 2 harvests were hit by unexpected frosts. We're behind on payments to our suppliers and the equipment is aging. Dad always handled the financial side, and when he died, I thought Nathan was helping. But now I wonder if he was setting this up all along." As Madison spoke, she realized how much she'd relied on Nathan, how much she'd trusted him with the business side of things. The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. "Okay," Maya said, her voice steady and reassuring. "Let's tackle this step by step. First, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Can you get me all the financial records? And we should talk to your father's old attorney. He might have insights we're missing. Madison nodded, grateful for Maya's practical approach. As they spent the morning sorting through paperwork, a plan began to form. They would fight for the vineyard, no matter what it took. That afternoon, Madison sat across from Thomas Wheeler, her father's old attorney, watching him review the paperwork. His office smelled of leather and coffee, just as it had when she was a little girl playing under her father's desk. "The situation is serious," Thomas said finally, removing his reading glasses. "But not hopeless. The vineyard is solely in your name. Your father made sure of that. Nathan can't touch it. But the debts. We'll figure it out." Thomas leaned forward. "Samuel would have wanted you to fight for this place, Madison. And that's exactly what we're going to do." As she drove home that evening, the setting sun painted the vineyard in shades of gold and purple. Workers were finishing up for the day, their figures silhouetted against the dimming sky. This land had been in her family for 3 generations. Her father had poured his heart into these vines, teaching her everything he knew before cancer took him 2 years ago. Madison parked in front of the house and sat there for a long moment, watching the darkness gather. Tomorrow she would start making calls, to vendors, to the bank, to everyone they owed money to. Tomorrow, she would begin the fight to save her father's legacy. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her abandonment, to let the tears flow freely in the privacy of her car. When the last light faded from the sky, she wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders, and walked into the empty house. She had lost everything except the one thing that mattered most, and she would do whatever it took to keep it. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as Madison cradled her coffee cup, her father's voice echoing in her memory. "The vines are like family, sweetheart," he'd always said. "They need patience, care, and most of all, love." She could still see him walking the rows, his weathered hands gently touching the leaves, checking the soil. Samuel Brooks had been more than just a vintner. He'd been a master of his craft, turning their small family vineyard into one of Sonoma Valley's most respected boutique wineries. A framed photo on the wall caught her eye. Her wedding day, 6 years after she'd met Nathan at a wine tasting event in San Francisco. She'd been so proud to introduce him to her father, this sophisticated investment banker who spoke eloquently about market trends and future prospects. Madison's reverie was interrupted by a knock at the door. Maya stood on the porch, armed with fresh pastries and determination. "I brought reinforcements," Maya announced, setting down a box from their favorite bakery. "And I've been thinking about the Harvest Festival next month. We can't cancel it. It's our biggest event of the year." Madison smiled despite herself. "The festival costs money we don't have," she sighed, but Maya was already shaking her head. "Remember what your dad always said? In wine, there's truth, and in truth, there's community." Maya pulled out her laptop. The community will help. They loved Samuel, and they loved this place. As they worked through the morning, planning and making calls, Madison's mind drifted to another autumn day, just months before her father's diagnosis. They'd been walking the vineyard together, discussing that year's harvest. "The soil here tells a story," Samuel had said, kneeling to scoop up a handful of earth. "Every season leaves its mark. The hard times, the droughts, the frost, they make the vines stronger. They dig deeper, fight harder. Just like people, sweetheart." She hadn't fully understood then. But now, facing the possibility of losing everything, his words took on new meaning. As the day progressed, Madison and Maya delved deeper into the vineyard's finances. What they found was disturbing. There were discrepancies in the books, transactions that didn't add up, and investments Madison had never approved. "Look at this," Maya said, pointing to a series of transfers. "Large sums moving in and out of accounts I've never seen before, and they all seem to lead back to a company called Global Dynamics." Madison frowned. "I've never heard of them. What do they do?" A quick internet search revealed little. Global Dynamics was a multinational corporation with fingers in many pies. Technology, pharmaceuticals, and apparently, wine. "We need to dig deeper," Madison said, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Nathan must have been involved with them somehow. It can't be a coincidence." As they continued their investigation, a pattern began to emerge. Nathan had been siphoning money from the vineyard for months, possibly years. But why? And where had it all gone? The next morning brought an unexpected development. As Madison was going through the pile of mail she'd been neglecting, she found a letter from a law firm in Seattle. Curious, she opened it. "Dear Mrs. Brooks," it read, "we regret to inform you of the passing of Mr. Harold Jenkins. As per his last will and testament, your presence is requested at the reading of his will on—" Madison stared at the letter in confusion. "Maya," she called out. "Do we know a Harold Jenkins?" Maya appeared from the study, where she'd been continuing their financial investigation. "Harold Jenkins? No, doesn't ring a bell. Why?" "Apparently he's dead, and I'm supposed to attend his will reading in Seattle next week." Madison handed over the letter. Maya's eyes widened as she read. "This is strange. It says he was your father-in-law, but Nathan never mentioned a Harold Jenkins," Madison finished. "He always said his parents died when he was young." The two women looked at each other, the same thought crossing their minds. Could this be connected to Nathan's disappearance and the financial mess they'd uncovered? "You have to go," Maya said firmly. "This could be the break we need." Madison nodded, her mind racing. "But I can't leave the vineyard. We have the harvest coming up, and the festival." "I'll handle things here," Maya assured her. "You go to Seattle and find out what this is all about." As Madison packed for her trip to Seattle, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the brink of uncovering something big. The mysterious Harold Jenkins, the connection to Nathan, the unexplained financial transactions. It all had to be connected somehow. She spent the flight to Seattle poring over the documents they'd gathered, trying to piece together the puzzle. By the time the plane touched down, she had more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Nathan's betrayal went deeper than she'd initially thought. The Seattle skyline loomed gray and imposing as Madison made her way to the law offices of Blackwood and Associates. Her heart raced as she stepped into the elevator, unsure of what awaited her at the will reading. As the doors opened onto the 42nd floor, Madison took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever revelations lay ahead. She was no longer just fighting for her vineyard. She was searching for the truth about her husband, her marriage, and possibly her own family's history. Little did she know, the will reading would be just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her life and the legacy she'd inherited. The law offices of Blackwood and Associates occupied the entire 42nd floor of a sleek downtown Seattle high-rise. Madison arrived 15 minutes early for the 10 a.m. reading, her reflection ghost-like in the polished elevator doors. The reception area breathed old money, all dark wood and leather, with views of Puget Sound stretching to the horizon. A silver-haired woman in a perfectly tailored suit approached her. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm Margaret Blackwood." Her handshake was firm, professional. "Please follow me. The others are already here." "Others?" Madison exchanged a glance with Maya, who had insisted on accompanying her, as they followed Margaret down a corridor lined with expensive artwork. The conference room fell silent as they entered. 5 people sat around a massive mahogany table, all strangers except one, a young detective who introduced himself as James O'Connor. Madison's attention was drawn to an elderly man at the head of the table, his white hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving him a scholarly appearance. "Welcome, Mrs. Brooks," he said, rising. "I'm Harold Jenkins, Samuel's brother. Your uncle, I suppose, though we've never met." Madison felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Maya steadied her with a subtle touch to her elbow. "I don't understand," Madison managed. "I don't have an uncle. My mother was an only child, and my father—" Harold's eyes softened. "Samuel Jenkins was your father's birth name, Madison. He changed it to Brooks when he was 18, for reasons that will become clear today." Margaret Blackwood cleared her throat. "Shall we begin?" She opened a thick folder, removing a document. "This is the last will and testament of Samuel Jenkins, also known as Samuel Brooks, dated October 15th of last year." Madison's mind reeled. Her father had updated his will just weeks before his death, and she'd never known. "To my daughter, Madison Brooks," Margaret read, "I leave the truth about our family's legacy, contained in the sealed envelope marked A, to be opened only after the reading of this will." The attorney continued reading, but Madison barely heard the distributions of various assets to the other people present. Her focus was fixed on the cream-colored envelope Margaret had placed before her. Finally, the formal reading concluded. The other beneficiaries, distant relatives and business associates she'd never known existed, filed out, leaving only Madison, Maya, Detective O'Connor, and Harold Jenkins. "Before you open that," Harold said, gesturing to the envelope, "there's something you should know. Your father, Samuel, he was protecting you. All these years, everything he did was to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" Madison's voice cracked. "From the same people who killed Nathan." Detective O'Connor leaned forward. "Mr. Jenkins, are you saying Mr. Brooks's death wasn't natural causes?" "Nathan knew too much," Harold continued, ignoring the detective's question. "He discovered the truth about Samuel's past, about the real reason for the vineyard's success. He tried to profit from it, and it cost him his life." Madison's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a key and a letter in her father's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, then both Nathan and I are gone, and the truth can no longer hurt you. The vineyard isn't just a vineyard, it's a facade. Beneath the main cellar is a vault, installed by my father in 1962. The key enclosed will open it. What you'll find inside explains everything. Why I changed our name, why I never spoke of my past, why the vineyard's wine was so special. Nathan discovered it last year. Instead of understanding its importance, he saw only profit. Trust Harold. He's the only one left who knows the whole story. And Madison, my precious daughter, forgive me for the burden I'm placing on you. All my love, Dad." Madison looked up at Harold, questions burning in her eyes. "The vault," she whispered. "What's in it?" Harold glanced at Detective O'Connor before answering. "Something that powerful people have been searching for since the Cold War. Something your grandfather protected, your father guarded, and Nathan tried to sell to the highest bidder." "That's why he emptied the accounts," Maya said suddenly. "He was running, wasn't he?" Harold nodded. "He thought money could protect him. He was wrong." Detective O'Connor stood. "I think it's time you all told me exactly what's going on here." "Not here," Harold said firmly. "The vineyard. Everything we need to know is there." He turned to Madison. "Your father had a saying. In wine there's truth." He meant it literally. Madison clutched the key, its metal warm against her palm. The vineyard she'd grown up on. The legacy she'd thought she understood. It was all different now. Her father's warnings about Nathan, his insistence that she learn every detail of the winemaking process, his mysterious absences during her childhood, pieces of a puzzle she'd never known she was supposed to solve. "We'll fly back today," she decided, her voice stronger than she felt. "All of us." As they left the law office, Seattle's rain had begun, drops sliding down the windows like tears. Madison thought of her father, of all the secrets he'd carried to protect her. She thought of Nathan, whose greed had led him down a path to destruction. And she thought of the vault, waiting beneath the vineyard's soil, holding answers she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Harold's voice broke through her thoughts. "Madison," he said gently, "there's one more thing you should know. The people who killed Nathan, they'll be watching the vineyard now. Opening that vault won't just reveal the truth. It'll put a target on your back." Madison straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of her father's key in her pocket. "Then we better make sure we're ready for them." The elevator descended, carrying them toward answers that would change everything. The vineyard wasn't just her inheritance anymore. It was her battlefield. And Madison Brooks, daughter of Samuel Jenkins Brooks, was ready to fight. As they stepped out into the rainy Seattle afternoon, Madison's mind was already racing, formulating a plan. She'd lost Nathan, discovered her father's secret identity, and now faced an unknown threat. But she was her father's daughter, and she wouldn't back down. "Maya," she said as they hailed a cab, "call the vineyard. We need to prepare for our return. And Detective O'Connor, I hope you're ready for a crash course in viticulture. We're going to need all the help we can get." The rain intensified as they drove to the airport, washing away the last vestiges of Madison's old life. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the promise of long-buried truths finally coming to light. The vineyard looked different in the fading light of dusk, its familiar contours now holding secrets Madison had never imagined. Maya drove their rental car up the winding driveway, followed by Harold's black SUV and Detective O'Connor's sedan. The journey from Seattle had been tense, filled with careful conversations and meaningful silences. As they approached the main house, Madison noticed an unfamiliar car parked near the winery building. Her heart raced, remembering Harold's warning about people watching the vineyard. "Wait here," Detective O'Connor said, his hand moving to his holster as he stepped out of his car. Madison ignored him, exiting the vehicle and striding towards the winery. She'd be damned if she'd cower in fear on her own property. "Madison, wait!" Maya called, hurrying after her. As they neared the building, the winery door opened, revealing a familiar face. Thomas Wheeler, her father's old attorney. "Madison," Thomas said, relief evident in his voice. "I've been trying to reach you. There's been a development." Inside the winery's tasting room, Thomas laid out a series of documents on the bar. "These arrived by courier this morning," he explained. "They're from Nathan." Madison's breath caught in her throat. "Nathan? But he's dead," Harold finished grimly. "Which means he sent these before." Thomas nodded. "They're legal documents. Nathan was transferring his share of the vineyard's ownership back to Madison, and there's more." He held up a USB drive. "This came with the papers. I haven't looked at it yet." Madison took the drive with trembling hands. Whatever was on it, Nathan had thought it important enough to ensure she received it after his death. As Detective O'Connor set up a laptop, Madison's mind raced. Had Nathan had a change of heart at the end? Or was this another piece of the puzzle her father had left behind? The files on the drive loaded, revealing a video. Nathan's face appeared on the screen, looking haggard and afraid. "Madison," he began, his voice hoarse. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant for it to go this far. Your father, he was involved in something big, something dangerous. I thought I could use it to solve our financial problems, but I was wrong. There are people after me now, people who will stop at nothing to get what's hidden at Brookside." Nathan's image leaned closer to the camera. "The wine, Madison. It's not just wine. Your father, he was encoding information in it. Government secrets, corporate espionage, things that could topple empires. It's all there, hidden in the molecular structure of the wine itself." Madison felt the room spin. Maya steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. Nathan continued, "I've transferred everything back to you. It's safer that way. There's a man named Victor Chen. He's dangerous, Madison. He knows about the wine and he'll come for it. Trust Harold Jenkins. He knows the truth. And Madison, I'm sorry. For everything." The video ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. "The cellar entrance is this way," Madison said, leading the group past the main house. The air was heavy with the scent of ripening grapes and approaching rain. Her flashlight beam bounced off the weathered wooden doors that led underground. The cellar had always been her father's domain. Even after she took over the vineyard's operations, he'd insisted on managing the aging process himself. Now she understood why. "The vault's behind the 1962 section," Harold explained, moving past rows of barrels. "Samuel showed me once, years ago. Said I needed to know in case anything happened to him." Madison's hands shook as she moved aside the false rack of wines, revealing a steel door set into the concrete wall. The key slid in smoothly, as if recently oiled. The door opened with a soft hiss. Inside, instead of more wine racks, they found a small room filled with filing cabinets, old computers, and a large safe. But what caught Madison's attention was the wall of photographs, dozens of them, spanning decades. Her father appeared in many, but younger, different. In some, he wore a military uniform she'd never seen. "Your father," Harold said softly, "was part of a program called Project Vineyard. It started in 1962, during the height of the Cold War. The government was looking for ways to encode and transport sensitive information that couldn't be intercepted or decoded." Madison picked up a folder from the desk, its pages filled with chemical formulas and winemaking procedures she'd never seen before. "They developed a method," Harold continued, "of encoding information into the molecular structure of wine. Each vintage contained classified data that could only be decoded with specific equipment and chemical markers. The vineyard was the perfect cover." Detective O'Connor whistled softly. "That's why the wine was so special. It wasn't just wine." "Nathan found out," Madison said, the pieces finally falling into place. That's why he started asking about modernizing the equipment last year. He was looking for the encoding process. Maya, who had been examining the filing cabinets, held up a stack of papers. Look at these dates. The program officially ended in 1985, but these records go all the way through last year. Because it never really ended, Harold explained. Your father and others like him continued the work privately. The information in these wines, it's worth millions to the right buyers. Or it could get people killed if it fell into the wrong hands. A sudden noise from above made them all freeze. Footsteps on the cellar stairs. We're not alone, Harold whispered, reaching inside his jacket. Detective O'Connor drew his weapon. Mrs. Brooks, is there another way out of here? Madison nodded, remembering her father's insistence on memorizing the cellar layout. There's a tunnel. It comes out in the north vineyard. Maya, take Madison and these files, Harold ordered, pulling a small revolver from a shoulder holster. The detective and I will handle this. I'm not leaving, Madison protested, but Maya was already gathering crucial documents. Your father prepared for this, Harold said urgently. Behind the safe, there's a panel. Go, now. The footsteps grew closer. Madison hesitated for a split second, then moved the safe aside with Maya's help, revealing a narrow passage. As they slipped inside, she heard voices above, unfamiliar, harsh. The tunnel was tight but navigable, clearly designed for emergency escapes. Maya's flashlight illuminated their way as they hurried through the darkness. Behind them, muffled shouting and what might have been gunshots echoed through the underground passage. As they emerged into the cool night air, hidden among the vines, Madison's mind raced. Everything she thought she knew about her family, her vineyard, even her wines, had been turned upside down. But one thing was clear. She was now the keeper of secrets that could change the world, and there were people who would stop at nothing to get them. Madison and Maya crouched low among the vines, their breath coming in short gasps. The night air was thick with the scent of ripe grapes and distant gunpowder. Through the rows, they could see flashlight beams sweeping the vineyard. We need to move, Maya whispered urgently. They'll find us if we stay here. Madison nodded, her mind racing. She knew every inch of this land, every hidden path and secret hollow. Follow me, she breathed, leading Maya deeper into the vineyard. They moved silently through the rows, the soft earth muffling their footsteps. Madison's heart pounded in her chest, every rustle of leaves making her flinch. Who were these people? What did they want? As they reached the edge of the property, a voice rang out behind them. There, by the old oak. Madison grabbed Maya's hand, pulling her into a run. They sprinted across the open field towards the neighboring property, an abandoned barn looming in the darkness. Gunshots cracked through the night air, bullets whizzing past them. Madison felt a sharp sting on her arm but didn't slow down. They crashed through the barn doors, slamming them shut behind them. Are you okay? Maya asked, her voice trembling. Madison looked down at her arm. A bullet had grazed her, leaving a bloody furrow. It's just a scratch, she said, tearing a strip from her shirt to bind the wound. We need to keep moving. They climbed to the hayloft, peering out through gaps in the weathered wood. Flashlights bobbed in the darkness, coming closer. Madison, Maya whispered. What do we do now? Before Madison could answer, the roar of an engine cut through the night. Headlights swept across the barn as a vehicle approached at high speed. The pursuers scattered, their shouts of alarm barely audible over the engine's growl. The vehicle skidded to a stop outside the barn. A familiar voice called out, Madison! Maya! It's O'Connor! We need to go now! They scrambled down from the hayloft, dashing to the waiting SUV. Harold was behind the wheel, his face grim. Detective O'Connor covered their retreat, his gun trained on the darkness. As they sped away, Madison looked back at her beloved vineyard, now swarming with unknown assailants. Her entire world had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. What happened back there? She demanded. Who were those people? Harold's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Victor Chen's men. They must have been watching the property, waiting for us to find the vault. Chen? Madison's mind raced back to Nathan's warning video. The man Nathan mentioned. O'Connor nodded grimly. Former CIA, now CEO of Global Dynamics. He's been after your father's work for years. As they drove through the night, Madison's mind whirled with questions. But one thing was clear. She was now in the middle of something far bigger and more dangerous than she could have imagined. The safe house turned out to be a modest cabin tucked away in the Anderson Valley, 3 hours north of the vineyard. Madison's father had purchased it under a different name 20 years ago, another piece of his carefully constructed security network. "We should be safe here for now," Harold said, checking the cabin's perimeter one last time. The morning sun was just beginning to peek through the redwoods, casting long shadows across the small clearing. Inside, Maya and Detective O'Connor had set up a makeshift command center on the kitchen table. The hard drive from the vault was connected to an old laptop Harold had brought, its screen filled with encrypted files. Madison stood by the window watching the forest. Her arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed her, a constant reminder of how close they'd come to disaster. "Look at this," Maya said, pointing to a document on the screen. "These aren't just government secrets. There are records of private transactions, evidence of corporate espionage, political blackmail." The wine was the perfect cover, Detective O'Connor mused. Nobody questions why bottles of expensive vintages are being shipped around the world. Madison turned from the window. "We need to talk to Nathan's business partners. Someone must know who he was dealing with." "Already working on it," the detective replied. "I've got contacts running background checks on everyone Nathan met with in his last months. One name keeps coming up, Victor Chen, CEO of Global Dynamics." Harold's head snapped up. "Chen? Are you sure? You know him?" Madison asked, noting the tension in her uncle's voice. "He was part of the original Project Vineyard. Left under suspicious circumstances in 1984. If he's involved..." Harold's voice trailed off ominously. A notification pinged on O'Connor's phone. "Speaking of suspicious," he said, reading the message, "Nathan had a meeting scheduled with Chen the day before he died. And get this, Chen's company just filed paperwork to acquire majority ownership of 3 wineries in Sonoma Valley. He's trying to find the encoded wines," Maya realized. "He doesn't know which vintages contain the information." Madison's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She put it on speaker. "Ms. Brooks," a smooth voice said. "I believe we have matters to discuss. My office tomorrow morning. Come alone, or the next story in the San Francisco Chronicle will be about how your father's prestigious vineyard has been running an illegal smuggling operation for decades." The line went dead. "Victor Chen," Harold confirmed grimly. "I'd know that voice anywhere." "It's a trap," Detective O'Connor warned. "Of course it is," Madison replied, her mind racing. "But it's also our chance to find out what really happened to Nathan." She turned to Harold. "Tell me everything you know about Chen. What made him leave Project Vineyard?" As Harold began to explain, Madison felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She was in over her head, surrounded by spies and secrets, but she was also her father's daughter. Whatever Chen had planned, she would face it head-on. The cabin fell silent as they all contemplated their next move. Outside, a bird called in the distance, oblivious to the web of intrigue and danger that had ensnared the humans inside. Madison looked at the faces around her. Maya, her steadfast friend, O'Connor, the determined detective, and Harold, the uncle she never knew she had. Together, they would unravel this mystery, no matter the cost. The day passed in a flurry of activity as Madison and her unlikely team prepared for the confrontation with Victor Chen. Harold's knowledge of Project Vineyard proved invaluable as they pieced together the complex web of secrets and lies. Chen wanted to sell the encoding technology to private buyers, Harold explained, his face grim. Your father stopped him, reported him. Chen lost everything, his clearance, his reputation. He spent years rebuilding through Global Dynamics. Madison nodded, absorbing the information. And now he wants revenge. No, Maya interjected, looking up from the laptop. He wants the master key. Look at this. She turned the screen, showing an encrypted email they'd managed to crack. Chen's been searching for something called the vintner's cipher. It's described as a failsafe, a way to decode any of the encoded wines without the specific markers. Detective O'Connor leaned in, studying the email. If this cipher exists, it would be worth billions to the right buyers. It exists, Harold said quietly. Samuel never told me where it was, but Chen must think Nathan found it. Madison's mind raced, remembering conversations with her father, odd comments that now took on new meaning. Dad used to talk about a failsafe, a way to keep everyone honest. I always thought he was being metaphorical, but... A sudden gust of wind rattled the cabin windows. In the distance, a helicopter's thrum grew louder. "Company," O'Connor said, drawing his weapon. But the helicopter passed overhead, heading north. False alarm. Still, the message was clear. They weren't as hidden as they'd thought. "We need to end this," Madison decided. "I'll meet with Chen." "Madison, no," Maya protested. "Yes, but not alone, and not empty-handed." She turned to Harold. "Help me understand exactly what we're dealing with. If Chen wants to play hardball, let's make sure we're ready." They spent the rest of the day preparing, reviewing files, connecting dots. The more Madison learned about Project Vineyard, the more she understood her father's dedication to protecting it. The encoded wines didn't just contain government secrets. They held evidence of decades of corruption, enough to topple empires. As night fell, Madison stood on the cabin's small porch, watching stars appear between the towering redwoods. Maya joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "Your father would be proud," Maya said softly. "You're fighting for something bigger than yourself." Madison thought of Samuel, not the father she'd known, but the man who'd spent his life guarding dangerous secrets. "I'm fighting for the truth," she replied. "Whatever it costs." Inside, Harold and O'Connor were still working, their voices a quiet murmur. Tomorrow, they would face Chen. Tomorrow, they would discover what really happened to Nathan. But tonight, in this moment of calm before the storm, Madison felt something she hadn't expected. Purpose. The vineyard wasn't just her inheritance anymore, it was her mission. The Global Dynamics headquarters loomed over San Francisco's financial district, its glass and steel facade reflecting the early morning sun. Madison stood on the sidewalk, her heart pounding. Maya and Detective O'Connor were positioned nearby, ready to intervene if needed. Harold waited in a cafe across the street, coordinating their makeshift operation. "Remember," Harold's voice crackled through Madison's hidden earpiece, "Chen's dangerous, but he's also desperate. Use that." Madison squared her shoulders and entered the building. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. When the doors opened, Victor Chen was waiting, a smile that didn't reach his eyes plastered on his face. "Ms. Brooks," he said smoothly. "Welcome. Shall we?" He gestured to his office. The view from Chen's office was breathtaking, but Madison barely noticed. Her focus was on the man behind the desk, the one who might have ordered Nathan's death. "I'll be direct," Chen began. "Your father's work, the encoded wines, I want them, all of them. In exchange, I'll make the legal issues surrounding your vineyard disappear." Madison met his gaze steadily. "And if I refuse?" Chen's smile turned cold. "Then I'll bury you in your father's legacy. I have evidence linking Samuel Brooks to decades of espionage. One phone call, and everything you love goes up in flames." "You're bluffing," Madison replied, her voice calmer than she felt. "If you had that kind of evidence, you wouldn't need me." A flicker of annoyance crossed Chen's face. "Your husband understood the value of what your father created. He was smart enough to make a deal. And now he's dead," Madison said flatly. Chen leaned back, studying her. "A regrettable turn of events. Nathan was careless. He drew attention from people even I can't control." Madison's mind raced. Chen hadn't killed Nathan, but he knew who had. "What do you really want, Mr. Chen? It's not just the wines, is it?" For a moment, the mask slipped. Chen looked tired, old. "The vintner's cipher. Samuel created a way to decode any of the vintages without specific markers. Nathan found it, but he hid it before we could complete our transaction. Find it for me, and this all goes away." Madison stood, her decision made. "I need time. The cipher could be hidden anywhere in the vineyard." "You have 3 days," Chen said sharply. "After that, I release everything I have to the press. Your father's reputation, your livelihood gone." Outside, Madison took a shaky breath. Maya was at her side instantly. "We heard everything," Detective O'Connor said, approaching. "We need to find that cipher before Chen does." Back at the vineyard, the search began in earnest. Every inch of the property was examined, every hidden compartment explored. Harold pored over Samuel's old files, looking for clues. As the second day dawned with no results, tensions rose. Madison barely slept, haunted by memories of her father and Nathan, both keeping secrets that now threatened everything. It was Maya who made the breakthrough. "Madison," she called, excitement in her voice. "Look at this." She held up an old photo of Samuel in the vineyard, a distinctive bottle in his hand. This vintage, it's not one we produced. Madison's eyes widened. The vintner's cipher. It's in the wine itself. They rushed to the cellar, searching for the bottle from the photo. Hours passed, each minute bringing them closer to Chen's deadline. Finally, in a hidden rack behind a false wall, they found it. A single bottle, its label faded but unmistakable. "We can't let Chen have this," Detective O'Connor warned. "The damage he could do." Madison stared at the bottle, her father's ultimate secret. A plan formed in her mind. "We don't give it to him. We expose everything." "That's too dangerous," Harold protested. "It's the only way," Madison insisted. "We use Chen's own threat against him. We release all the information, but on our terms. The truth comes out, all of it." The debate raged through the night. By morning they had a plan. Dangerous, audacious, but possibly their only chance. As the sun rose on the third day, Madison made the call. "Mr. Chen, I have what you want, but the deal's changed. Meet me at the vineyard, alone." The stage was set for a final confrontation. Madison stood in the vineyard's main building, the cipher bottle on the table before her. Maya and Detective O'Connor were hidden nearby, ready to record everything. Harold monitored the approach roads, watching for Chen's arrival. This was it. The moment that would determine the fate of her father's legacy, the truth behind Nathan's death, and the future of secrets hidden in wine for generations. Madison took a deep breath, steeling herself. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. The truth, for better or worse, was about to come to light. The crunch of tires on gravel announced Chen's arrival. Madison watched through the window as he stepped out of a sleek black car, alone as instructed. The weight of the moment pressed down on her as she remembered her father's words. "In wine, there's truth." Chen entered, his eyes immediately locking onto the bottle on the table. "I see you've been successful, Ms. Brooks." "I have," Madison replied coolly. "But before we proceed, I want answers. What really happened to Nathan?" Chen's smile was thin. "Your husband got greedy. He tried to play both sides, me and some other interested parties. It didn't end well for him." Madison's hand tightened on the bottle. "And my father? Was he truly part of your Project Vineyard until the end?" "Samuel Brooks was a patriot," Chen said, a hint of respect in his voice. "He believed in the mission long after the government abandoned it. But he was also a fool. All that power, all those secrets, and he never used them for personal gain." "That's where you're wrong," Madison countered. "He used them to protect people, to keep the truth safe until it could do the most good." Chen's patience was visibly wearing thin. "Enough philosophy. Hand over the cipher, and I'll ensure your vineyard's future is secure." Madison took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. "I have a counteroffer, Mr. Chen. I'm going public with everything. Project Vineyard, the encoded wines, all of it." The color drained from Chen's face. "You wouldn't dare. You'd be destroying decades of work, endangering national security." "No," Madison interrupted. "I'd be fulfilling my father's real mission, bringing the truth to light." She pressed a button on her phone, and suddenly Chen's earlier threats began playing through hidden speakers. His admission about Nathan, his attempt at blackmail, all recorded. "It's over, Chen," Detective O'Connor said, stepping out from his hiding place, badge in hand. "We have enough to put you away for a very long time." Chen's composure cracked. In a sudden move, he lunged for the bottle. Madison was quicker, snatching it away. The struggle was brief but intense. As they grappled, the bottle slipped from Madison's grasp, shattering on the floor. Among the spilled wine and broken glass lay a small metal cylinder, the true vintner's cipher. Chen dove for it, but Maya was there in an instant, kicking it across the room to Harold, who had just entered. "It's done," Harold announced, holding up the cylinder. "The information's been transmitted. Every major news outlet, law enforcement agency, and intelligence service will have it within the hour." Chen slumped, defeated. As Detective O'Connor handcuffed him, Madison felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The lies, the secrets, they were finally ending. In the days that followed, the world reeled from the revelations. Project Vineyard became front-page news. Government agencies scrambled to contain the fallout. Corporations and politicians named in the encoded wines faced investigations and public outcry. Through it all, Madison stood firm. She testified before congressional committees, explaining her father's work and the impossible choices he'd faced. The vineyard, once at risk of being lost, now thrived as curious visitors flocked to see the place where history had been hidden in plain sight. Months passed. Slowly, the media frenzy died down. The vineyard, once a cover for secrets, began a new chapter. Madison stood among the vines, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. Maya joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "You know," Maya said, offering Madison a glass, "your father would be proud. You protected his legacy in a way he never could." Madison sipped the wine, a vintage from the year her father had died. "I just did what I thought was right. The truth deserved to be free." They stood in comfortable silence, the vineyard peaceful around them. The harvest was coming soon. A new vintage that would carry no hidden messages, no encoded secrets. Just the truth of the land, the grapes, and the people who tended them. "So?" Maya asked, a smile playing at her lips. "What's next for Madison Brooks, hero of the wine world?" Madison laughed, the sound light and free. "First we finish this harvest. Then, who knows? But whatever comes, no more secrets. Just wine, truth, and maybe a little adventure." As the last light faded from the sky, Madison raised her glass in a silent toast. To her father, to Nathan, to the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The vineyard had been her inheritance, then her burden. Now, finally, it was her choice. A legacy she could shape on her own terms. The future, like a fine wine, was full of promise. And Madison Brooks was ready to savor every moment of it. 1 year later, Madison stood in the doorway of the winery's tasting room, watching as visitors sampled the newest vintage. Truth Uncorked, Brooks Vineyard Legacy Blend. The room buzzed with conversation. Cameras flashed as people posed with bottles labeled with the vineyard's new motto, "In wine, there's truth." Maya approached, clipboard in hand. "The From Secrets to Sunlight tour is fully booked for the next 3 months," she reported with a grin. "And the Washington Post wants to do a follow-up piece on the 1-year anniversary of the exposé." Madison nodded, a mix of pride and contemplation on her face. "It's still hard to believe sometimes. Everything that happened, everything that changed." They walked outside, the autumn air crisp and invigorating. The vineyard stretched before them, the vines heavy with ripe grapes almost ready for harvest. Workers moved between the rows, their voices carrying on the breeze. "Have you thought more about Harold's offer?" Maya asked as they strolled. Madison sighed. After the dust had settled, Harold had approached her about continuing some of her father's work, not the covert operations, but using their unique skills and connections to uncover other hidden truths, to bring light to dark places. "I have," Madison replied. "And I think it's time. The vineyard is stable, the legacy is secure. Maybe it's time for a new adventure." Maya's eyes lit up. "I was hoping you'd say that. I may have already started some preliminary research on a few interesting cases." Madison laughed. "Of course you have. Well, partner, where do we start?" As they discussed potential investigations, corporate cover-ups, political scandals, long-buried secrets waiting to be unearthed, Madison felt a familiar thrill. It was the same feeling she got during harvest, or when blending a new wine. The excitement of creation, of bringing something hidden into the light. They reached the old oak tree where her father had taught her about wine so many years ago. Madison placed a hand on its rough bark, feeling the connection to the past and the promise of the future. "You know," she said softly, "Dad always said that every vintage tells a story. I think he'd be happy to know that we're still telling stories, just in a different way now." Maya nodded, understanding in her eyes. From vineyard to investigative team, it's quite a journey. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in vibrant hues, Madison took in the scene before her. The vineyard, once a cover for secrets, now stood as a testament to truth and resilience. The tasting room, filled with people eager to be part of the legacy. And beside her, Maya, steady and supportive through it all. "To new horizons," Madison said, raising an imaginary glass. "And to the stories yet to be told," Maya added with a smile. They turned back toward the winery, where the day's last visitors were leaving, bottles of truth uncorked tucked under their arms. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new mysteries to unravel, but tonight, Madison would savor this moment, the peace of the vineyard, the satisfaction of honoring her father's memory, and the excitement of the path ahead. As darkness fell, the lights of the winery glowed warmly, a beacon in the night. For Madison Brooks, daughter of a vintner and keeper of secrets, it was more than just a home or a business. It was a reminder that from the deepest shadows, truth could flourish, rich and complex as the finest wine. The story of Brooks Vineyard was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning its next magnificent chapter. What did you think of the story? Please leave a comment with your opinion. 2 buttons will appear next to it, one to subscribe, if you haven't already, and another to watch other exciting stories. Make your choice. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.